Mishpacha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish mother. I am here today with a pseudo book haul. Now, why am I calling this a pseudo book haul? So, there are 3 books that I actually bought recently and had sent to me that are new to my collection. And the other books I'm going to show you, I did haul them here, but I hauled them from my office at work to my house. So, they are books you haven't seen yet, and they are books I want to try to read by the end of the year, but that's why I'm calling this a pseudo haul, because I actually already own most of these, except for the first 3 I'm going to tell you about. So it's a pseudo book haul. Shop in your own closet, you know. So first book is one that I've actually already read. So this is James Baldwin's Giovannis Room. This is an excellent novel. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it. It is about an American man named David, and this is set in the, I want to say 1940s or maybe 50s. I think maybe 50s, yeah, because it's definitely post-World War II. So anyway, so it's about this American man named David who is kind of struggling to come to terms with his sexuality, and he's living in Paris, and he meets this Italian man named Giovanni, and they begin a relationship. Meanwhile, David has a longtime girlfriend whose name is Hella, or Hella, I'm not sure which one it is. And so, you know, sort of the plot ensues from there. And at the very beginning of the book, you find out that, so this is not a spoiler or anything, because this literally happens like in the first couple of like pages of the book. But you find out that David is actually awaiting Giovanni's execution. So that's also a plot thread. You're kind of like wondering the whole time, well, why is he being executed? What happened? What's the story behind that? What did he do? So anyway, this is James Baldwin, so it is exquisitely written, as is everything by James Baldwin. It's one reason why he's one of my favorite writers of all time. So I did not previously own this book, but I read it last year, late last year, and I actually taught it in my gender and lit class in the spring, and I'm teaching it again in a different class this fall, and so I thought, should probably just get my own copy of this. Okay, so I mean, I basically told you the plot of it, but I'll read you what it says on the back. So it says, set in the 1950s Paris of American expatriates, liaisons, and violence, a young man finds himself caught between desire and conventional morality. With a sharp, probing imagination, James Baldwin's now classic narrative delves into the mystery of loving and creates a moving, highly controversial story of death and passion that reveals the unspoken complexities of the human heart. And again, it's James Baldwin. Please read this book. This is the first sentence of it, if I can entice you with that. I stand at the window of this great house in the south of France as night falls, the night which is leading me to the most terrible morning of my life. I have a drink in my hand, there is a bottle at my elbow. I watch my reflection in the darkening gleam of the window pane. My reflection is tall, perhaps rather like an arrow, my blonde hair gleams. My face is like a face you have seen many times. My ancestors conquered a continent, pushing across death-laden plains, until they came to an ocean which faced away from Europe into a darker past. Okay, so I actually read the first paragraph, but anyway, it's just good. You should read this book. So that's Giovanni's Room. The next book I bought recently is the Cambridge Companion to the AfricanAmerican novel. This is edited by Mariama Graham, and this has contributions from excuse me, a variety of scholars. And the reason I bought this is because I'm teaching a course this semester on the novel, and I themed it around the development of the African American novel. So currently my students are reading Frances Harper's Ida Leroy, then they're going to read Autobiography of an Ex-Colored Man, then Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, then Giovanni's Room, and then the last 2 books are going to read our neo-slave narrative. So one is Toni Morrison's Beloved, and the other one is Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad. So in addition to those 6 books that they're going to be reading throughout the semester, I also am assigning them some critical readings in literary theory, and so I bought this book because it had a couple of readings in it that looked good to me. So yeah. This, like I said, is just sort of a collection of essays from different people. So it has It has a section on the African-American novel and history. It has a section on the search for reform, the new American novel, and I'm guessing that's going to have to do with like Alan Locke and his concept of the new Negro in the 1920s or 30s. And then, is that the whole thing? Yeah, okay, I guess that's it. So there's stuff on the novel After Slavery, the neo-slave narrative, coming of age in the African-American novel, the novel of the Negro Renaissance, and then there's modernism and postmodernism, blues, and then there's stuff on several specific writers like Richard Wright, Ralph Ellison, James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, Zora Neale Hurston, Alice Walker, etc. So, yep, that's pretty much it, and there's no reason for me to read the first sentence to you because this is a collection of critical essays. So that's the Cambridge Companion to the African-American Novel. I highly doubt I'm going to actually read this book from cover to cover, but I am curious to see whether some of the essays in here will be good critical readings for my students. And then the last book that I actually bought recently is this big behemoth, and I did not realize how big it was when I bought it. African-American Literary Theory, a Reader. And I love that the subtitle of this is a reader, because when I think of a reader, I usually think of something that's short. Not necessarily a primer, but something's definitely shorter than something you could basically use as a doorstopper to beat an intruder to death with. So, anyway, so it has a whole smattering of African-American literary theory. So it starts with some classics like W.B. Du Bois, George Schuler, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Richard Wright, Alan Locke, and then it goes to more contemporary. Well, not these are not contemporary people. Then it goes to like some stuff from the 70s and the Black Arts movement. So it's got stuff by Larry Neal, Addison Gale, Henry Louis Gates, Houston Baker, Deborah McDowell, Shirley Ann Williams, Hortense Spillers, and then it's got some stuff that's a little bit more contemporary by May Henderson, Valerie Smith, Andrew Seal, Harriet Mullen. So that is the African-American Literary Theory, a Reader book. Again, another book I'm not going to read cover to cover, but I am excited to have a lot of different pieces of literary theory, especially ones that I've taught before and some that are new to me, all in one place for when I teach African-American Lit in the future. So yeah. Alright, so those are the 3 books that I actually bought recently. Now we're moving on to the pseudo part of the haul, the ones that I hauled from my work office to here. So the first one is Kazuo Ishiguro's When We Were Orphans. So I read my first Kazuo Ishiguro novel, The Remains of the Day, over the summer and absolutely loved it. It emotionally wrecked me. I ugly cried at the end. And that really made me want to read. It was 5-star read, so that really made me want to then go read his other novel that I own, which is When We Were Orphans. So this says, renowned London detective Christopher Banks was born in Shanghai at the beginning of the 20th century and lived there relatively happily until he was orphaned by the disappearances of his father and mother. Now, more than 20 years after leaving Shanghai, he is a celebrated figure in London society. Yet the criminal expertise that has garnered him fame has done little to illuminate his understanding of the circumstances of his parents' alleged kidnappings. Banks travels back to the seething, labyrinthine city of his memory in hopes of recovering all he has lost, only to find that the Sino-Japanese War is ravaging Shanghai beyond recognition, and that his own recollections are proving as difficult to trust as the people around him. So that last part reminds me a lot of the main character in Remains of the Day, with like not sort of being able to trust your memory and lying to yourself. So I'm intrigued to read this. The first sentence of it is, Part 1, London, 24th of July, 1930. It was the summer of 1923, the summer I came down from Cambridge, when despite my aunt's wishes that I return to Shropshire, I decided my future lay in the capital and took up a small flat at number 14B, Bedford Gardens in Kensington. So I'm really looking forward to getting to this one before the end of the year. The next book I brought from my office is Italo Calvino's If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. Italo Calvino was an Italian writer. It says on the back that he attained worldwide renown as one of the one of the 20th century's greatest storytellers. Born in Cuba, he was raised in San Remo, Italy, and later lived in Turin, Paris, and Rome, among other places. So this book, it says, if on a winter's night a traveler turns out to be not one novel but 10, each with a different plot, style, ambiance, and author, and each interrupted at a moment of suspense, together they form a labyrinth of literatures, known and unknown, alive and extinct, through which two readers, a male and a female, pursue the storylines that intrigue them and one another. So this sounds very postmodern. Don't know if I will get on with it, but hey, I'm curious to read it. It is one of his best-known works. So, the first line of this is, you are about to begin reading Italo Calvino's new novel, If on a Winter's Night a Traveler. Very meta. Okay. Next book that I brought from my office is V.S. Naipaul's The Middle Passage, the Caribbean Revisited. It does say on the cover that V.S. Naipaul is a Nobel laureate in literature, so that's cool. This is nonfiction. It says, in 1960, the government of Trinidad invited V.S. Naipaul to revisit his native country and record his impressions. In this classic of modern travel writing, he has created a deft and remarkably prescient portrait of Trinidad and 4 adjacent Caribbean societies, countries haunted by the legacy of slavery and colonialism, and so thoroughly defined by the norms of empire that they can scarcely believe that the empire is ending. So yeah. I might leave this for nonfiction November, since it would be appropriate for that. So the first line of this, oh look, it has a map. There was such a crowd of immigrant-type West Indians on the boat train platform at Waterloo that I was glad I was traveling first class to the West Indies. So yeah, that's The Middle Passage. Okay. I also brought from my office Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, which is a classic of African literature that I still haven't read, so I would like to read this. It says, Things Fall Apart tells 2 intertwining stories, both centering on Okonkwo, a strong man of an Igbo village in Nigeria. The first, a powerful fable of the immemorial conflict between the individual and society, traces Okonkwo's fall from grace to the tribal world. The second, as modern as the first is ancient, concerns the clash of cultures and the destruction of Okonkwo's world with the arrival of aggressive European missionaries. These perfectly harmonized twin dramas are informed by an awareness capable of encompassing at once the life of nature, human history, and the mysterious compulsions of the soul. I love it when descriptions of a book veer into the dramatic at the end. Alright, so the first line of this is, Okonkwo was well known throughout the 9 villages and even beyond. So yes, that's Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. And now we've gotten to the books that I'm going to call things I should have read for comps, because they were all on my list for my comprehensive exams in graduate school. So the way it worked in the English department at Auburn, where I went to graduate school, was that you had 3 areas of focus. So mine were American pragmatism, 20th century Jewish American literature, and 20th century African American literature. And then you had this big long list of books in each subject that you were supposed to read, and then you took written exams on them, and you also had an oral exam. So it was a list of probably 100 books or close to it, and I had like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months to read all this stuff in, so there was no way I was going to get to everything. So I had to sort of be strategic. I mean, I read as much of everything as I could, but, you know, I had to skip some things. So these are books I should have read for comps. So the first of them is Ann Petrie's The Street. And I was actually sort of inspired to put this on my list sooner rather than later by Seiji at the Artisan Geek, because I know she recently read this with her Patreon book club. So I was curious to read it as well. So it says, as much a historical document as it is a novel, The Street is the poignant and unblinkingly honest story of Ludi Johnson, a young black woman in her struggle to live and raise a son amid the violence, poverty, and racial dissonance of Harlem in the late 1940s. Originally published in 1946, The Street was Ann Petrie's first novel, a bestseller with more than 1.5 million copies in print. So, the first line of this is, there was a cold November wind blowing through 116th Street. It rattled the tops of garbage cans, sucked window shades out through the top of open windows, and set them flapping back against the windows. And it drove most of the people off the street in the block between 7th and 8th Avenues, except for a few hurried pedestrians who bent double in an effort to offer the least possible exposed surface to its violent assault. So, that sounds a little foreboding already. So that is The Street by Ann Petrie. The next book in my I should have read it for comps is Kevin Young's Black Maria. This is a collection of poetry. Okay, it does have a flap description. Kevin Young follows his acclaimed exploration of the blues in Jelly Roll with another playful riff on a vital art form, giving us a film noir in verse. Black Maria, the title, is a slang term for a police van as well as a hearse. Is a twisting tale of suspicion, passion, mystery in the city. Young channels the world of detective movies, picking up its lingo and dark glamour in 5 reels of poetry. And then it goes through and tells you about each of them. So yeah, I don't think I've read anything by Kevin Young before. I have not. So, and this is not a super recent collection, but I think it's published since 2000. Let me check. Yeah, 2005. So it's not super old. So I'm excited to finally, at long last, get around to this, even though I should have read it for comps. And then the last book, which I also should have read for comps, is Colson Whitehead's John Henry Days. So I read Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad. I'm teaching that this fall, and I really liked it, so I want to go back and read some of his backlist, and this seems like an appropriate place to start since I already own it, and I should have read it for comps. So, this says, excuse me, immortalized in folk ballads, John Henry has been a favorite American hero since the mid-19th century. According to legend, John Henry, a black laborer for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad, was a man of superhuman strength and stamina. He proved his mettle in a contest with a steam drill, only to die of exhaustion moments after his triumph. In John Henry Days, Colson Whitehead transforms a simple ballad into a contrapuntal masterpiece. The narrative revolves around the story of Jay Sutter, a young black journalist. Sutter is a junketeer, a freeloading hack who roams from one publicity event to another, abusing his expense account and mooching as much as possible. It is 1996, and an assignment for a travel website takes Sutter to West Virginia for the first annual John Henry Days Festival, a celebration of a new U.S. postal stamp honoring John Henry, and there the real story of John Henry emerges in a graceful counterpoint to Sutter's thoroughly modern adventure, etc., etc. So, this was this is signed. Oh, I did not know this. This is a signed copy. That's exciting. Okay, work. When was this published? 2001. This was published in 2001. Work. I'm so excited this is signed. Okay. Alright, so the first sentence, or first little paragraph of this is, about 45 years ago, I was in Morgan County, Kentucky. Alright, I'm not going to read the second sentence because it has a problematic word in it that I probably shouldn't read out loud. So that's all you're going to get. He was in Morgan County, Kentucky. So I'm excited to read this, but I'm more excited that it's signed. So that shows you how much I've looked at this book. Not much. But I am excited to get it, especially since I should have read it for comps. So that is the end of my book haul / pseudo book haul. Let me know if you have thoughts about any of the books that I've mentioned. I hope you're all doing well and staying healthy. And until next time, would it kill you to call your mother?